Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on raising early stage capital in MedTech. I'm Kirsten Loit of Osage University Partners, where I lead our university relations efforts. And today, I am very pleased to be joined by three amazing panelists who I got to know through the Equalize program. I can talk more about that later on in our webinar. These are all CEOs who have succeeded recently in raising capital for their early stage medtech startup companies. I'm going to have them briefly introduce themselves right now, and then we'll do a longer introduction later. So, Layla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Layla Danishmandi. I'm the co-founder and COO of Encapsulate.
Thanks, Charlie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Childs. I'm co-founder and CEO of Intero Biosystems, and we spun out of the University of Michigan.
Great. Thanks. And Kaylin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kaylin Haw. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bermuda, and we spun out of Tulane University.
Great. Looking forward to talking more with all of you soon. I did want to do some logistics before we get started. I wanted to note that the slides and recording of this webinar, these very brief slides we're going to have at the beginning, are going to be available via OUP's partner portal, and the recording will also be available via our YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know, OUP maintains an online partner portal for our partner universities that is full of relevant tech transfer content and startup content. This is something that both the researchers at our partner institutions as well as the tech transfer officers have access to. You can find a link to that through the QR code noted here, but you can also find a link to our YouTube channel through the other QR code noted here as well. We do have the recording, sorry, I should have mentioned, the recording for this will be available next week. The person who usually handles all of our recordings is out this week, but she'll be sending around to everyone who registered next week. And then we also have some upcoming webinars that may be of interest to our audience today. We have one on the amazing Lilly Catalyze 360 program next week. That's on September 17th. I will put a link to the registration for that in the chat in just a little while. And then we have our annual Ask a VC webinar on October 15th. That's with a couple of our with our partners here at OUP. And they'll be talking about anything that you want to talk about with regards to venture capital, how it works, what are we investing in, what are you seeing as trends, etc. Just any questions you want to ask about venture capital will be answered on this particular webinar. And the registration for this will be coming up starting next week. So keep a lookout for that on LinkedIn. So a short intro on OUP for those of you who do not know us. We're a venture capital fund that partners with academic institutions to invest in their startup companies, typically by exercising participation rights available through the licenses at the academic institutions. For those of you who don't know, participation rights are the ability to invest in a future round of a company on the same terms and conditions as other investors. We do have recommended language on participation rights if your institution has a question on this. As part of the partnership that we have with our academic institutions, they share in a portion of our profits, and they also receive programmatic support on tech transfer and academic startups. We're now on our fourth fund here at OUP, and we've made investments in over 150 companies, all in all areas of deep sciences that we can actually show on this next slide. We have both a life sciences team as well as a tech team, and they invest in a lot of a variety of areas, just as very full as the academic institutions that we work with. So that's just a brief introduction on OUP and what it is that we do. But what we're really here today is to talk about raising capital in raising early stage capital for MedTech. And I'm going to actually stop sharing because the rest of this particular webinar is going to be discussion with our three awesome panelists here. So we're going to start with each of them talking about their particular stories on how they have gotten to the particular point that they're at. And I'm going to have each of you provide a 5-minute introduction on your background, your company, why you started your particular company, what led you to the journey of leading your particular company, and then how much you've raised so far. And Layla, I'll start with you.
All right. So our company Encapsulate was spun out of the University of Connecticut. My co-founder and I were both PhD students when we first started coming up with the idea and understanding the problem. So we've raised over $10 million to date. It's been 5 years that we incorporated the company. And what we do is that we've developed a tumor on a chip system that can take a cancer patient's cells from the initial biopsy when they're first diagnosed, grow it outside the body in the device, and then test all the possible chemotherapy drugs to determine the most effective drug for the patient. I honestly took a course in entrepreneurship. I wasn't really familiar with the field. It was a technology entrepreneurship course that my co-founder and I took, and in there, they asked us to come up with an idea. My background at the time, my PhD is in bone tissue regeneration, and my co-founders was in cancer medicine. And so we kind of combined our backgrounds in a sense to think of the technologies that we could develop. And very early on, the class was focused on user-centric innovation. So understanding the user, the customer that you're innovating for. And so from the very early days, we would talk to oncologists, being in the field of cancer. And so that's kind of how we understood this problem exists in cancer therapy, that sometimes there are drugs that are available. It's that choosing the most effective one could be difficult. And so I would say early on, talking to the end user, the person that would eventually be using the product, really helped narrow the scope and how we even, build the technicalities of the product. And then from then, we started, as a small student venture at the university level, and then the state level, and the national, and it kind of grew organically, and we learned along the way. And did I answer all the questions, or is there anything else that I should pay attention to?
I think you did. Yeah, no, that was a terrific introduction. Kaylin, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Infomuta, and so we spun out of Tulane University in New Orleans. So kind of prior to starting the company, my background, I was doing my PhD in Tulane's biomedical sciences program. I was focused on studying kind of the genetic mechanisms of how extensively drug-resistant pathogens become extensively drug-resistant. So focus a lot on DNA biology, next-generation sequencing techniques, and antibiotic resistance mechanisms. And did that for about 3 years into my PhD, and then knew my co-founder, Leah Williams, and we're already friends at the time, but we started collaborating on this project together because he was a bioinformaticist studying cancer biology, and he had developed some pipelines to look at cancer genomics data using a technique that was relatively new to the field, basically looking at these things called mutational signatures and looking at how patterns of mutations can be used to figure out what processes were or were not active in a cell. And we basically came up with the idea that no one done this in bacteria before, and this could be a really interesting technique to apply to sequencing data as a potential diagnostic technique to see what the bacteria were doing to become antibiotic resistant. Originally, we kind of thought it would just be a really cool, high impact paper. But at the time, around fall 2022, Tulane actually kicked off this huge innovation initiative, opened up a brand new innovation institute, started a lot of entrepreneurship programs. And the two of us kind of talked about the idea of potentially starting a startup together. And it kind of gave me everything I was looking for. I originally wanted to be a tenure track professor, but I really wanted just the creative freedom to pursue the science that I wanted to make an impact on the world, and thought that leading a startup and bringing in innovation to the clinic would give me the same kind of fulfillment I wanted out of my career. So we started off initially doing a lot of pitch competitions, eventually spun the company out, and then got some seed investment. And now we are in our first clinical studies and actually getting validation for the technology. So we've been doing the company for almost 3 years now. I've grown the team quite a bit, and it's been a really exciting journey so far. Yes, I think I answered all the questions there.
That's terrific. And yeah, congratulations to both of you on all the success so far. Charlie.
Hi, everybody. I am co-founder and CEO of Intero Biosystems. We make miniature human organs to replace animal testing in preclinical pipelines, but also it's applicable to things like food and supplements and chemicals, anywhere we're using animals where we could be using a more human relevant model. So I got my BS at the University of Wisconsin, and then I came straight to the University of Michigan to do my PhD. We spun out of the university a little bit over a year ago, and we're still based in Ann Arbor. And I was recently named an Activate Fellow, which is a technical fellowship for PhD trained scientists who are in hard tech areas. So we've been at it for a little bit over a year, and it's been a really fun ride. Halfway through my PhD, me and my co-founders kind of realized we had this really cool technology and we could make a really big difference, just echoing everything Kaylin just said. I didn't want to be a professor. I wanted to push this really hard. The idea of like independence and chasing the questions I thought were cool while still making a big impact was really appealing to me and my co-founders. So we jumped at the opportunity. None of us had ever run a startup before, but prior to graduate school, one of our co-founders worked in a startup scaling a cell-based product. So we had like a little bit of a framework, but not much to go with. So the university was extremely helpful in helping us understand how to do customer discovery. We started taking business classes. We applied for academic commercialization grants. We started attending a lot of industry-focused conferences and really drilling down on our IP. So we did that for about 2 years to collect a lot of good science data and business data to make sure we were launching this venture in a really supportive environment in the right markets and just giving it the best shot that we possibly could. And so the month before I defended my PhD last year, we officially spun out the company to start applying for SBIRs. We then started getting approached by customers pretty quickly and realized we probably needed some cash to execute on the interest. So we recently closed our pre-seed round back in June, where we raised just over $2 million in dilutive funding, and we have just over 600,000 in non-dilutive. So excited to talk about how we got there today with everybody.
That's fantastic. So first of all, I love all the similarities and commonalities, but also the differences between each of your answers. Also, I think this is really great context setting for the rest of our discussion then about how you actually achieved getting to this point. Then also talking about next steps that, because this is a non-ending journey, right? There is hopefully an end. But at the same time, like when you're in the startup, you're just constantly thinking about how are we going to have our capital. And so that's part of the discussion that we're going to have today. So what I'd like to talk about next is the talking about the early stage capital that you've brought into the company itself. What were the sources? How did you first learn about those sources? We're trying to help people, especially those who are on the call, who are maybe thinking about taking the same kind of journey. How did you actually learn about those sources? How did you get intro to those sources? Talk through the process of actually getting the money. Some people are like, well, how does this come in? What do you do with the bank accounts, et cetera? And then what else are you receiving besides money from the sources? Because often it's not just capital you're receiving, but there's some other efforts that are helpful to your companies as well. So I'd like to spend a bit of time talking about that. And I'm going to go do reverse order this time. Charlie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, totally. So the sources that we found were primarily, we started off in just the local ecosystem. So the state of Michigan has some really awesome pre-seed funds. They're primarily funded through the Economic Development Corporation and other state funds. And I've heard that a lot of other states have this as well. So definitely go check that out. The University of Michigan also has 3 different venture funds that invested in us. So we're really fortunate to have their backing and their early stage support, both from money and from all other aspects, like I mentioned before. Really where a lot of our money came in was we went to a ton of pitch competitions and met a ton of people who ended up investing in us. So we won the Michigan Business Plan competition, we won the Baylor New Ventures Plan competition, we won the Heartland Business competition, and then we won the Rice Business Plan competition where we won over $900,000 in investment prizes. And we met some amazing people. It was like the best experience ever. Awesome advisors, awesome supporters. Obviously the capital is great. And that really extended our reach outside of the Midwest. So we were going for a small pre-seed of about $800,000 and we were able to fill that with our local ecosystem. And then we realized we had a lot more interest than we originally anticipated and ended up closing it over 2 million. So we were really fortunate to have so much support. We first learned about these sources through a local pitch day, like VC matching day. Michigan has one where startups sign up and then the investors sign up and they match you and you have 20-minute meetings. And we did that last November and realized we should probably be raising money to keep up with the customer demand that we had and to be able to grow as quickly as we wanted to. So the way that kind of worked, I made a lot of mistakes. Happy to talk about it with anybody. I could have run a little bit more of an efficient process. But in November, we were like, okay, we should probably start raising. But not a lot of activity happens at the end of the year. So we kind of got all of our ducks in a row. And then at the beginning of January, we learned that we needed a data room. So that was exciting to figure out. That probably took the majority of our time figuring out what goes in a data room and what's the most useful way to tell our science to people who maybe aren't in the same field as us. And so in January, we started giving local investors our data room. We've probably spent about a month to a month and a half in diligence. And then we were able to close that initial 800K in about 2 weeks. But again, very fortunate to be having a lot of interest. So we extended that for about another month and closed after about 2 months of having our round officially open. Besides the money, we've gotten a lot of connections to other investors and customers. We have some really awesome advisors. And what we're most excited about is we have a lot of female founded funds and like funds that support diverse founders. So it's been really awesome to have that support, both on like a personal level and just knowing other people in the ecosystem who may be facing the same struggles that we are. So I think that is it. I will pass it off to the next person.
Great, Caitlin. Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah, so I think in the earliest days when we first had the idea to start the startup, I think that we also similar to Charlie, I think focused on the student pitch competitions because I think we had we were fortunate enough to take advantage of those because both Leo and I were still PhD students. So I think we started local, which with just the ones in the Tulane ecosystem. So we had like I mentioned, the Innovation Institute was starting some new initiatives. So we were kind of the first people to go through all of those and won a small bit of money through those. And then also the Tulane Business Model Competition, I think were like the initial ones we did. And then that kind of just gave us some initial money to do like some legal stuff and other random things, buy like a not a high performance computer, but a nicer computer for us to do like our computational work on. And I think that really what catalyzed the need to get some investment was Leo graduating and needing to either get a job or pay him some money to keep working on the company. And so at that point, we actually used a little bit of prize money to pay him something. And then we ended up raising a very small, kind of a mix of a friends and family and small angel round to get us through the beginning of 2024. And then we actually also did Rice Business Plan competition, which was a phenomenal experience and ended up doing really well at that, and a couple other business competitions. And that kind of catalyzed meeting a lot of both angel networks and small funds through that. And then similar to Charlie, we also took advantage of the like Louisiana Economic Development and SSBCI funds. So we've raised quite a bit of money just from those local funds as well. And ended up closing about $1 million last fall. And then this year we've raised about another $1 million so far. It's still raising on that. So that is kind of the investment piece. We've also, of course, pursued research grants as well. So we've won an NSF SUTR. We're planning to pursue our phase 2 as well, and then pursuing other grants kind of in tandem with all the investment pieces. So I think that we've kind of taken the approach where we've tried to pursue every single avenue of funding available to us, just because you never know what's going to hit. And there's pros and cons to each, which I think we'll dig into later. But I think when you're starting at the earliest stage, the pitch competitions are great because you don't necessarily have enough traction for investment. And then we kind of like looked at the angel route. And then once we got enough traction, we went the VC route. And then kind of all in tandem, we were looking for the non-dilutive grants as well. So we've kind of taken advantage of everything that's available to us.
I think that's a really important point, as you have a lot of different routes you can take, and you have to be systematic about it and use your time wisely. But yeah, you don't know how the markets are going to go, and therefore you don't know what your availability of capital is going to be in the future. So pursuing the lines that you can is very important. That's a great point, Caitlin. All right, Layla, same question.
Yeah, totally. Similar. We started at the university level, pitch competitions for students, national competitions for students. We would get some money there, and then I think we would start from, even it being 5K initially. Even that amount helps when you're early on, because I think all of us are working in high tech fields where we're building a technology. And to get to the stage of investment and having an investor invest in that, or getting an SBIR even, you have to demonstrate some technical validity there. And those experiments need money. So, even the 5K, 10Ks will help for you to get to that stage where you have enough data to apply for those grants, or, show your deck to an investor. So we started similarly, gradually, university level, then the state level, national. We did a couple of international stuff as well. And how we found out about it, honestly, a word of mouth. A lot of people in the space know another program that might be beneficial. You have peers that you see go through programs, and you talk about their experience, and they may recommend a program to you that might be a good fit. And then even Googling a lot of times, like what programs are available. And then I think as you build your network also in this space, people will let you know. So for instance, two of the really good programs that we went through, our I guess friends that we made through different programs told us about this, that I think, your company would be a good fit for that program as well. So the power of networking, I would highly recommend. It's good to have good contacts in the entrepreneurship space. And then our, I think, first big win kind of was towards the end of our PhDs. We won an award from the International Space Station. At that time, it was around $650,000, which was a lot of money for two PhD students to get. So then we were like, okay, this is serious. People really believe in us. And that kind of catalyzed us really seriously thinking about this has the potential to actually be a company now. And so after that, we went through different programs. But what I want to emphasize is that even though we won, let's say, over $500,000 in a grant, we would still go back and apply to pitch competitions and programs. So because there's always going to be, gaps in some of these grants that you get that you can't, spend on certain things. So having a 5K or 10K award that has freedom to spend it on, even office supplies or whatever you need, kind of helps you out there. And then so we went through a lot of programs before we got to the NSF stage of sending an SBIR and getting it. And then even after we got investment from investors, dilutive capital, we still send non-dilutive grants. So we've actually gotten quite a lot of money after both of our investment rounds. So what I'm trying to say is, I think, just map out everything you need. And I think Kaylin said it well. There's pros and cons to every one of those, avenues that you pursue, but it's really trying to go after every opportunity that's available and you think would be a good fit for you, because you don't know what's going to happen.
And I just really want to echo, like, the amount of $5,000 checks that you can weave together, like, really, really, really make a difference. If you need to pay for an attorney to help with your data room or the raise, like, $5,000 will get you at least somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All terrific points. We're going to delve more into now this journey of raising capital and ask some really much more specific questions. And Leila, you actually started answering the first one already, which was, how did you get your leads and who has been helping you? Do you want to dive a little bit more? Is there anything more granular you can provide on that, about how you got your leads and who has been helping you?
Yeah, for sure. So our technology is a platform technology in the cancer space. The National Cancer Institute has its own webinars, for example, on funding opportunities that are available. You can see the solicitations online. You can Google them and see what's available. And that happens for every organization, right? So we talk about the SBIRs and SCTRs from these federal organizations, but then each organization has its own. And so you would want to look at the solicitation there, understand what's important for them. They usually have a couple of webinars. Sometimes the program directors are available for you to reach out to. So attending, I think, even virtual events, even I'm sure OUP has it. Your university may have some events about upcoming cycles that are available. And just kind of understanding what's there. I've sat on a couple of panels now for the PFIs, the SBIRs. So from this angle, I've also kind of seen the discussions on, compared to academic writing, I would just say that there's more of a focus on the commercialization aspect, what product would eventually be created, because I'm sure, you know, the specifics and the technicalities are amazing and everyone's working on interesting ideas. It's just what would the product be at the end of the day and what impact would it have? And that's something that, you know, is important when you're building a company. That's what really differentiates it from an academic lab. And word of mouth again. So you can, you know, even make an Excel sheet and track down. That's, I think, what I did like years ago when we first started about all these competitions and all these grant cycles and the deadline dates that they have. So you just know if you don't catch it this year, maybe next year you can still apply. There also might be lists like that now, because I see it on LinkedIn all the time. People are sharing some lists about, you know, the top venture funds that are available right now, or will invest in this sector. So just building that database for yourself is helpful. And to some degree, databases can be shared, but also it's an exercise that I think each company needs to do. Even when you want to go out and raise investment from, you know, VCs or investors, there are investor lists, but then it's also important for you to be able to kind of tailor that for your company, because, you know, you're looking for a specific check size at a specific stage, and your platform is a specific thing, and it's not going to fit every investor. And that's really important to realize, that it's a two-way relationship. You're looking for, yes, money, but also, you know, additional support probably from the investor, and they also have a specific you know, thesis that they're looking to invest in. Even if you might have the most amazing technology, it just might not be a good fit. And sometimes it's as simple as that. And so knowing that before you go in is going to save you a lot of time.
A terrific point about doing your homework, and being thoughtful about who really is going to be a good match for you as well. So I totally recognize your remarks. I've been seeing a lot of those lists as well. I think it's terrific that people are kind of opening up what they used to kind of keep as proprietary, that people are kind of making open source out of. But then I agree. It's just like using AI, et cetera. Like, you can use it, but you gotta actually, you know, review it and make sure it is appropriate for you. So, Kaylin, same questions to you about how you gotten your leads and who particular has been helping you.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that Layla said. I think if you're gonna reach out to someone, definitely do your homework beforehand and potentially try to get a warm intro through your network. I think to kind of add a different perspective. So I think how I've gotten most of my leads are through mostly just kind of like organic networking. So whether it's those initial pitch competitions where I just met someone who knows someone and introduced me to someone who I should talk to, or I think you just never really know, especially from if you're raising kind of angel money, you never know who you're talking to who has kind of some money that they're willing to write a check. And I think just looking to make genuine, meaningful connections and willing to share your story, I think that goes a long way. The other thing is, I think I've gotten a lot of my leads through other founders. So I think other founders, either in similar spaces or even directly in my space, like I think a lot of people are kind of scared to talk to founders who might be competitors. But I think that's kind of a bad attitude to have, because I think that more, you're more likely to cannibalize than to die from a competitor. And so I think that being willing to kind of collaborate and cooperate and learn from people in your space and learn from mistakes, and also kind of share who you've talked to and who works well and is willing to invest in this space actually goes a long way. And I've made some good friends who are direct competitors in the antibiotic resistance diagnostic space, and we kind of like stay in touch and help each other out.
Yeah, that's really an important point, is finding a community that will help you along this particular journey. And I know there's a number of communities out there, be it for people who are coming out of their doctoral programs, or, you know, being in the biotech space, et cetera. But that's a great point, Kaylin. Charlie, anything you want to add then about getting your leads and who's been helping you?
No, just networking and warm introductions. Like, I have this rule, which Kaylin said perfectly, like, you don't know who you're talking to. So it's time consuming, but talking to as many people as possible, you'd just be surprised at what will pan out and who will be willing to help you.
Yeah. All right, so slightly a different question next. And we're going to get through a few questions here, and then we got a number of questions from the audience as well. So this question is a little bit different, and I think it's true for a lot of our audience members, is that, you all originally started out in academia. Some of you talked about how you'd planned a different career journey than you're on right now. Talk about your switch from presenting academic research to a startup pitch to investors and kind of the mindset that had to happen from that. So Kaylin, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's so different. I think the biggest thing is knowing who you're talking to and knowing the right message that you're trying to say. And I think kind of knowing the time and place to know how deep to go into the science. So I think that if you're just talking to someone conversationally, kind of giving an elevator pitch or even just giving an intro meeting pitch, you don't need to have 5 slides of data and kind of go through the whole methodology and every supporting detail. And I think that a lot of people kind of fall into that trap when they've been in the academic mindset for so long. And I think also kind of losing sight of the real business case and why you should invest. And I think that there is always time to delve more into the data if they ask, or delve more into the data on the second or third meeting for due diligence. And I think that a pitch is not a scientific presentation. It's completely different things. And also, I think there are actually some overlapping things because I think a good academic presentation does tell a story, and you should always be telling a story in your pitch. But I think the level of detail in the science and also the language you use is very different. And I think that a lot of trained academics fall a lot into the trap of really getting excited about the science and the data, and that's what they want to focus on. And also assuming that people know the words you're using and getting stuck using jargon and just assuming, because I think that we're like stuck in this bubble for so long and we just assume that people know, like you just take for granted the words that people know. And I think that you should just practice talking to non-science background people and just make sure they understand how you're explaining your technology before you go pitch to investors.
Layla, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, I have so many things that I've learned along this way. I agree. I think coming from academia to pitching, I was gonna say almost all the time you have to make sure that you're talking to a more general audience, but there are a few exceptions in case, there's some investors that are very specific. They, might completely know the technical language, but except for those exceptions, I would say almost always it's about you. It's not really about the PowerPoint that you have. So even if, you go on a stage or somewhere, the point is for the audience to pay attention to what you're saying, not necessarily look at your slides. And I think that's one of the biggest differences because, in academia, you're mostly showing the data that you have and the results that you've achieved. So that's just one mindset to make sure that it's about how you're articulating. Talk slow. You don't need to say everything. You can leave stuff out. It doesn't have to be, a perfect representation of the data or science. It's just more of getting a message across. And, if it's for pitch competitions, there's a story to tell. So you can, every word counts. Everything has to be planned out and timing wise and, the wording that you're using. I would say that it takes a lot of practice too. So if you have friends or both technical, non-technical folks that you can pitch to, please do and ask for feedback because they'll tell you your strengths and weaknesses that you can learn more about. It might seem simple, to be honest. It's just a presentation talking probably for 5-10 minutes in front of an audience, but it really does make a difference. Like even some of the founders and companies that I remember being in different rooms are the ones that I was really just in awe of their presentation, how they delivered the message and emphasized on what they were doing. So it does leave a lasting impression. And it's also fun, I would say at this point. It's also fun, At the beginning it wasn't. I would get a lot a lot of nerves, but now it's also exciting because now I think that it's not really about me. It's about me just having that moment to be able to deliver the amazing work that the company is doing. And I just really want to make sure that I deliver that message as best as I can.
That's great. That's great to hear too, honestly, about the change that's happened to you over time with that. And I think that reinforces for a lot of people who for this is really new to, that it does get easier over
Yeah,
time.
it does. Oh my God. So I was not comfortable at all in the beginning. Pitching. I wouldn't pitch, I think, for the first 2 or 3 years of the company. I've more so pitched in the last the 2, 3 years. And so just to say, like, I've won a lot of pitch competitions. This is not meant to brag. It's just to say that even someone that this wasn't natural for them or never saw themselves necessarily as doing this can go on and win awards, and I'm sure everyone else can do that too. um, Everyone has strengths that will show. And then, we even came second place in the Entrepreneurship World Cup, and that was between 16,000 applications. So I'm a firm believer that everyone can achieve it if they want to, and it's just a matter of practice and strengthening your skills.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Great. Thank you, Layla. Charlie.
That's reassuring to hear, Layla, because you're one of the best pitchers I've ever seen. So the imposter syndrome is over. So it's a learning process. Like everybody said, I'm still getting better at it every single day. The hardest thing for me was changing from like the grad school mindset where everything had to be perfect because people were going to poke holes no matter what you said, to like this more you can say declarative statements and you can tell a story. You don't have to tell the whole story. So I just want to echo everything that Kaylin and Layla have said. The biggest thing for me that I've really come to appreciate is that you need to have like succinct, short answers. One thing that academics are notorious for is they just go on and on and on and on. And that is great in certain cases, but when people like, you only have a 30-minute meeting, they want to learn as much as they can about you. You need to have very specific answers. Me and my co-founders like practice the answers now to make sure we hit all of our talking points while we don't like bore our audience or lose them in technical detail and things like that. So just really practicing your story and any answers that you have, and that will take time, but you will eventually get there. Yeah.
Awesome. You all have now mentioned pitch competitions, and so I want to talk about pitch competitions a little bit. And for those, because a lot of our audience members haven't done a pitch competition before, I'd like for you to talk about how pitch competitions work and what kind of training you did for them that helped, because you all have done them and won them. So Charlie, I'll start with you.
Sure. Each one has a little bit of a different way that they go about doing it. It's usually how long of a pitch you're allowed to give, but just generally how it works is you're given an allotted amount of time. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 3 minutes, it can be 20 minutes. It's never like an hour. It's not an academic seminar to pitch your company, and then the judges usually ask you questions afterwards. I've seen like bracket style tournaments. I've seen ones where everybody just goes at the same time, and then at the end they announce the winner. So most of the ones that I have done have been under 10 minutes. So it's very, very important to have, like Layla said, like a very clear story. Every single word counts. You have your answers ready to go that the judges are going to ask you. But I think the biggest way to win these pitch competitions is just to be yourself and be personable, and be passionate about what you're doing, and just really sell to the audience like how into this you are, because we're also into what we're doing, and get them as invested in it as you are. And all these little tiny pitch competitions, like we said before, not only you can weave together these little checks that make a really big difference, but it's a really good practice for going to due diligence with investors. It's a great way to meet investors. It's a great way to dial your story in, and the feedback is fabulous. One thing that me and my co-founders always joke about is like in academia, the feedback you get is always like not mean, but not nice. And honestly, like in the business world, they'll give you really like straightforward feedback, but everyone's been very nice about it so far. So that was a nice surprise.
Layla, I'll go to you next.
I agree with what Charlie said, and I completely echo what you mentioned about the Q&A, because it's so important. Imagine there's a room of judges or investors, and each of them probably has a couple of questions, and they really want to get answers to those questions. So if you keep your answers long, they're going to miss out on that opportunity to ask questions, and it's going to affect the next step, whether that's building the relationship with them, or if it's just for the pitch competition and for the sake of winning. So make sure that your answers maybe perhaps even maybe a rule like don't go over the 30 seconds unless it's something that's, a longer question. And then in addition to what Charlie said, I just wanted to mention that yes, there's prizes for these pitch competitions, but also a lot of the times it's about what happens afterwards, because there's going to be other people in the room, investors in the room, or maybe strategics in the room that you can, again, it's an opportunity to pitch your company to them as well. So a lot of the times the point of the pitch is to get the second meeting, and so keep that in mind as well, to just build that network, because once you pitch, everyone in the room knows about your company, so you have that opportunity to move around and kind of talk to more people. And then for the pitches, it's going to be different formats, and just make sure that if you have a slide, everyone should be able to understand the slide kind of in one glance. And so it actually takes a lot of time to kind of perfect the message, and that's why you can ask for feedback from your mentors and a lot of different people, and you're probably going to have over 100 iterations of the slide deck over time. I think looking back maybe from 5-6 years ago, we thought we had an amazing deck, and then now I look at it and it's cringy. So what I've learned about entrepreneurship is that it's iterative. There's never going to be a perfect state, and you're always, especially as an academic coming from the mindset of perfection, you're always going to want to improve things, and it's just constant.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Layla. Kaylin.
Yeah, I think that was what I was going to emphasize. I think the pitch competitions are great, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of them if you have the opportunity to do so. I think coming from the academic and like scientist mindset, I think the most helpful thing about them was not just the free, no strings attached money that you can win if you do it, but even if you don't win, because I think pitch competitions, I'd say the con of them is that they are very time intensive, and often the prizes are rather low. Like I think the rice is kind of the exception, which those are investment prizes often, so there are strings attached. But I think the highest like cash prize I've seen is like upwards of 80,000. So it's not a really, it's not going to like fund your whole round to do it. But and it takes a lot of time and preparation. Often you need to travel for them. But I think the biggest value of them is the both the people that you meet and the feedback and the iteration that you can do from them. And then I think in the earliest stages, coming from the scientist mindset, it really forces you to sit down and put a pitch deck together. It forces you to sit down and think, who is my customer? What is my business model? What am I going to charge? Even if you are so, so, so wrong, it like forces you to do it and think about it and actually put a business plan together when you're thinking about the technology and just the development path and getting it to the clinic. It forces you to think about, how is this even a business, and how am I going to sell this, and how is this even going to make any money to begin with? And then you actually get live feedback on that, and then you can just keep iterating and iterating. And I agree, Layla, our pitch deck from 3 years ago was incredibly cringy. And I think that and also the big thing is, even though the cash isn't going to fund your whole company, the pitch competitions will give you cash often way before investors will. And so you can get that earliest capital before you're really an investable company, before you have any traction. And so I think that's where the real value of those competitions come in.
Absolutely. Getting that early stage, those first amounts of capital coming in, like those are often the most critical to kind of get things out of to the next stage. So I'm going to ask a few questions from the audience. Now we have a number of questions, pre-prepared questions that we already had left, but I do want to get to our audience questions as well. So the first one was about resources your university provided. Could you talk about what was the most critical resources or programs or assistance with regards, because we're talking about raising capital, with regards to raising capital that your university provided? Kaylin, I'll start with you.
I'd say the most critical and practical was good license terms. And honestly, I think like if at the absolute bare bones, that is the bare minimum that you need from your university if you're going to spin out a company and you're a PhD student or a professor and your university owns your IP. And you really need that, really some sort of option or letter of intent to raise any money. I think beyond that, I think that the definitely, so we got investment directly from Tulane, and so that obviously was very helpful to get started. And we also got a kind of like um, a proof of concept grant from Tulane as well that was really critical before we were at the stage to get any investment. So I think that was, so we had a $50,000 grant from Tulane, and then we also have gotten direct seed investment from Tulane. So I think those were really critical support from them as well. But not every university has that. So I think if university doesn't have innovation support, I think the license terms is the bare minimum that you should be getting, good license terms.
Thanks, Kaylin. Layla?
I agree. That's real. The license terms are very important. Yeah, I think just the innovation, entrepreneurship support. We talked about the 5K, 10Ks. In addition to the little amount of money it is, it's also kind of a validation that you can, just later show on that, external people have also validated our work and they've believed in us. And probably you'll find some mentors or advisors that have some outside of the university experience, either being in VCs or being in, industry at decision-making levels. And so maybe you can get some advice from them that would help your strategy for the company. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, and you probably have an NSF I-Course program because it's available at most universities. I would say if you haven't already, definitely take advantage of that program. It's an intensive program for a couple of weeks, but you'll learn a lot about customer discovery, and there's follow-on opportunities after that. These are the ones that I can also think of that it's good to take advantage of.
Charlie?
Our university has a lot of academic commercialization grants, which were super helpful. We were incubating in my thesis lab still, so we got about 350K worth of money towards those. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Michigan has 3 different actual venture funds that can invest in companies coming out of the university. And that was really awesome because going to other investors, we were like, hey, the University of Michigan is fully behind us. We hadn't had our license agreement signed yet. We actually signed it last Friday. We had an option in place, but without a license, people, it's scary because that's a huge unknown for the technology. So it was very easy to be like, hey, like they're all in. They can put their money, they only have a limited amount of money and they've picked us. So we really think that the licensing is going to go well, and it did go very well, and we're very thankful for that. But one thing that came up over and over again in licensing negotiations, which both of Layla and Kaylin have mentioned, is without good licensing terms, we cannot continue to raise. So I think everyone on the call who is from universities, like, totally get, you put in a lot of money to this technology, you deserve something in exchange, but in order for everybody to win, fair licensing terms is what's going to make our ability to raise more money and make the companies more valuable for an acquisition.
Great, thank you all for that. Charlie, we had a question about, you mentioned data rooms earlier, and that was, a new thing to you. And the question was just about what type of data investors asked for in the data room. This is something that we could probably talk about for quite a long time. But can you just give a brief overview, like, of what was in there and what surprised you and what didn't?
Yeah. Well, first thing I'll say is, like, the $5,000 check that we randomly won helped us get an attorney who helped us figure out what to put in the data room. So that's huge. What they really want to see is they want to understand, like, your technology, your market, your competitors, and like what the acquisition potential is. So it was a lot of like, here's a ton of companies just like us, and here's what they've raised, and here's what they've been acquired for. We had a deck that was like, our technology for anyone who doesn't have a science background. You have to talk about your IP. Basically anything that would help your investor understand your technology enough to want to give you money should go in the data room. That being said, I think there's a line between showing too much data and showing enough to get the money, and I'm still learning that line. So it's a lot of like, here's scientific papers that we have. I don't think a lot of people read the scientific papers, so we provided like a annotated bibliography on what all the papers that we had in the data room were. I'm not sure that was relevant. I'm not sure anyone actually looked at that, but just things on your technology and things on your market are really what they're looking for. But it's a whole entire like 3 webinar series on what you should put in your data room, I feel like.
All right, we have a couple of questions on what, since you were all in MedTech, what you're hearing from investors as far as what they expect to see as far as stage of product. And we also have questions about, you're now going to be going on to your next stage of raising funding from VCs and kind of how those conversations. So maybe you could talk about kind of the stage of your technology and what VCs are telling you as far as what to expect next from those stages in order to attain that next level of funding. Is that question kind of clear? I think it covers like 3 different questions people have sent in to talk about that. So Layla, I'll start with you.
So we're MedTech. We're a platform technology or biotools also sometimes considered. Well, for the past few years, I've heard that investment has not been good in MedTech. I actually attended an event in Boston and realized that MedTech is probably one of the worst areas in life sciences for investment. I don't know if it's true. I'm hoping it's not. So what I've heard is for a Series A, you have to have some sort of revenue, at least in the current landscape. That's for Series A and beyond. And before that, so I think for, a technology, a platform, it's important to think of it in milestones for your raises. So, you can't expect to, let's say, raise 5 million or 10 million for whatever round it is, your first or second round, and then expect to go all the way to market and just have this be a gray area. There has to be specific plans for each stage. And it's okay to say, let's say I'm raising 2 million today in a seed round. It's going to get me to a Series A, and in Series A, this is what I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. I think having that clarity is important. Whatever your plan is, go to market or scalability or, perfecting the product in some aspect. I think just having clear plans help, and just having those plans, those are the plans that you need to go over multiple times with advisors and peers and even other investors for advice. Those are the areas that will you can get help to kind of shape them and understand what the plans of your company can be. Maybe day one you think that if I perfect this product, then I'm ready to go to market and I'm ready to get my first customer. It's most probably not going to be like that, and there's still going to be in between steps that you need to take or other stuff that you need to take care of. So you can think of the different maybe pillars of the company that you need to advance one by one to, let's say, you can target product deployment as your target. And so thinking about those in milestones, and probably your investors also, after you have investors, will want to see your advancement in those different pillars. That's important. I think yeah, that's just like the business aspect, that when we talk about it being different from academia, sometimes it's not as clear. What we mean is that product development is one pillar of the company, but there's also relationship building, having strategics on part, or having customers that you want to acquire or retain, or who you want to hire. And all of that's also kind of important to advance for the company.
Caitlin, do you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think I really want to echo kind of the last part of what Layla said. I think so. We're specifically in the diagnostic space, which is kind of its own niche thing within medtech and has its own challenges. And so we're in a regulated market, so we have to get either some sort of regulatory approval before we can even start making revenue. And like I mentioned before, we're currently doing clinical validation. I think so. And I think it kind of depends on what stage you're at of what investors want to see. And I think also the bar is kind of moving right now with market conditions. So I think that's a challenge in its own. So I think what would have been sufficient a few years ago is not really sufficient right now, just due to general macro market conditions. And I think that just data is not enough, and just like showing if you have really good clinical data, if we completed a whole clinical study, and having really good data is not really enough from my experience and other founders I've talked to in the diagnostic space. Like another really big thing that investors want to see right now is some sort of commercial and market validation of, is there demand? Are you seeing that there's demand that people would buy this at the end of the day if we give you the money to actually develop this all the way to the end and get through FDA? So the way that we've kind of focused on that is getting kind of cemented partnerships with health systems and showing that we have the market demand, we have letters of intent, we have full legal agreements with health systems that show that they're committed to taking this all the way through implementation. That has helped a lot. I mean, obviously, the ultimate commercial validation is revenue in the bank, but there are challenges around that where regulated markets in medtech space can't do that until we get through FDA. And it's kind of the chicken and the egg where investors want to see people would buy this, but people can't buy it until you have the money to get it through FDA. So I think really honestly, I think the best way, because even in the general medtech space, kind of different markets, like I think investors for Charlie, investors for Layla, and investors for myself might want different things. So I think the best way to find out is go talk to your investors, prospective investors, and see way in advance. So if you're planning to raise in next summer or next fall, I would go start talking to them now and say, you know, I would just start building the relationships and say, I'm looking to raise like fall 2026. And what could I do to make me like an 8 or 9 or 10 out of a 10 fundability? What would really excite you for this deal? And then go do that. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Charlie.
Yeah, it's been pretty rough. Just to echo what Kaylin said, what we have been doing since it's been such a moving target is we constantly are checking in with who we want to be like our leads and our big checks in our next round. So we're looking at like maybe skipping our seed and going straight to a Series A since we were able to raise a little bit more money than we thought. And since the target continues to move every like 90 days or so, I like check back in. I'm like, how are things going? How are we feeling? You know, what do you want to see in this next round? And obviously like things swing so fast, you can't have what your team is doing swing that fast. You need to kind of stick to your guns and what you're doing, but maybe something in the market is causing investors to think, you know, maybe we need XYZ for this next round a year. And you can kind of think about how you're going to integrate that into your story and into the value inflection milestones that you're trying to achieve in that moment. I wish I could be like, I'm cautiously optimistic that things are going to get better, but I think it's still going to be pretty hard for a little bit. Even at our pre-seed, people wanted to see customers and revenue, which was like pretty crazy. Fortunately, we had customer interest, but my understanding was they weren't going to want to see that until a Series A. So we're seeing that in order to raise the Series A, we're going to need a good amount of revenue and a good amount of customers, which we can do, but it's different than how it was in the past.
Yeah. Thanks for talking about the current market, and because I know that's on a lot of people's minds, and therefore what this means for as they are starting their own entrepreneurial journeys. So we're just about out of our regularly scheduled time. I know that you all can stay on another 15 minutes. Is that right? We do have a lot of other questions from the audience, and so I'd like to get through some of those. I know some of our audience is going to have to leave at the top of the hour. We will continue recording this for another 15 minutes. So if we can't get to your question before the hour ends, we will try to get to them in the next 15 minutes. And so feel free to watch the video afterwards. So with that, I'm going to get to some of these other questions that have come in. Is the location of launching a company important, for example, in MedTech? Is being in San Francisco area or another kind of metropolis for this important? And Kaylin, I'm going to start this with you because you moved.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that, yeah, so for context, so I mean, we started the company in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then now we are in San Diego, California. We moved because we are now in Johnson & Johnson's JLabs incubator system out here. I think yes and no. So I think that I think there's pros and cons to being in the two main hubs. I'd say the two big hubs are obviously the Bay Area and Boston for life sciences. Um, I I think that the biggest advantage to being in the two hubs, I think really is the massive access to capital and kind of the organic opportunities to meet investors there. I don't think you're limited really to having a successful startup in those two hubs, though. I really think COVID has permanently changed the world to where people don't meet face to face all the time anymore, and I think people are very used to meeting online and video calling and never potentially having a partnership and never meeting in face to face. And so I think that has changed a lot of how things work. And also, I think there's a lot of programs that you can do. For example, all three of us did Equalize, and that can give you that access and that organic nature of meeting investors without actually living in one of those hubs. And also, I think that Charlie and I both highlighted that non-major hubs also have their own advantages where, so for example, I in New Orleans took advantage of all of the local funds there, where we kind of were a big fish in a small sea, which I think has its major advantages rather than being one out of thousands of startups competing for the capital in Boston and San Francisco, where if you are in a smaller hub, and you're kind of a one of the few startups there, you kind of have a much higher chance of getting the capital in that smaller hub. So I think there are a lot of things to consider, but I think we're in the day and age where you don't have to uproot your company and move to either San Francisco or Boston to be successful.
Thank you, Kaylin. Charlie, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think really what it comes down to is how hard you have to work for it. So if you're in one of the hubs, it's way easier, like straight up. That's just how it is. You can just go get coffee with an investor. You can check in like way more casually. We work extremely hard at keeping our relationships up. Like I'm in Boston or San Francisco at least once a month, like trying to have these more organic, casual conversations with these people, but I have to pay to go there. So there's definitely an advantage, but you can totally do it outside of the hubs. One thing that our company has been thinking a lot about is how expensive it is to live in these hubs. And like, we're not a billion-dollar company yet. We'd love to be, but like our current idea, if we were to raise the amount of money that it would take to live in one of these hubs, it would like, it's not a good investment. It's not being good stewards of the money that we're raising, and it's not a win for us or our investors. So while we do have to work harder to be outside of the hubs, everything Kaylin said is true, and it can still be done. So it's just a matter of like, do you want to live that lifestyle, or do you want to live in the Midwest where it's a little bit cheaper and you might have to fly a little bit more, but you can still retain those relationships?
Thanks. Layla, anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree with everything that was mentioned.
All right, great. Well, next question is to you, Layla, because I think you mentioned the Entrepreneurship World Cup. Is that right?
Yeah.
And someone just asked what level of clinical data was needed to get initial investment. And so first of all, was it useful? And then what level of clinical data was needed to get initial investment?
So there's 3 different levels of the competition, if I remember correctly. There was an early stage, mid stage, and probably a later stage. So, if you don't have clinical data, you could just enter into the earlier category. I'm guessing for that one, they don't need any clinical data. And then, yes, it was useful. And that goes for, I would say, every kind of program that I've participated in. We're here to talk about raising capital. There will be programs that don't necessarily offer capital. It's more just, the network, or they'll bring in advisors or experts in the field, and you can really learn from there. I still found a lot of value in those programs because, first of all, it's, as we mentioned, it's never ending. You're always learning at different stages of your company. There's new things that you need to learn about. And so these accelerator programs, or competitions, or cohort model programs, there's always going to be a good amount of learning involved that I would highly recommend to go through, even if they don't necessarily provide capital. So keep in mind, not necessarily you have to have a fancy award at the very end to think that a program is useful or not. We actually found a lot of really important relationships for strategic partnerships through some of these programs that we went through. And you never know, something could lead to something else that could lead to investment. From Equalize, we met someone that later on I don't know, Kirsten, if you know this, but invested in our seed round. Or one program we went through and they were interested to invest, they didn't, they referred us to someone else, they were interested, they didn't, and then the third person actually invested. So you never know where your lead for investment is going to come in, and that's why it's important to just make sure you're on for the networking. And it's genuine relationships. It's not just necessarily a transaction. Also, sometimes we think because it's an investment, it's a very transactional relationship. No, if you have good investors, you can actually call them up for different types of advice. Something comes up in your company and you know who to go to for what question. So that's also important to know.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Equalize program too, Layla. The applications for next year's cohorts are going to open next week, and so when we send out a copy of this recording, we'll send the link to that as well to people, it's just so that they're aware of that too. So, okay, totally different question again. And this was about investors and how much the investors, when you receive investment for dilutive funding and deciding how much was provided to the investors for that dilutive funding. You don't have to talk about how much, et cetera, but could you just talk about how that process has worked when you've gotten your dilutive funding? And Layla, maybe I'll start with you on that one and see if anyone else wants to.
Sure. So when you typically want to raise a round, you have an idea of how much you want to raise, and that's what you're going out for, and your ask is, let's say it's a $1 million, and so it's up to you if you want to raise all of that from one investor. If you want to split that up, you can, let's say, get it from two, or you can get it from maybe 500K from one investor and then smaller checks from different investors. There's different ways to do it, really. And so if you have your ask, and you probably have a valuation for your company at that point, and valuations are, again, you look at peer companies, there's different ways to do it. And so within that range, once you, let's say, hit 1 million and your valuation is 10 million, it's just a math that needs to be done at that point of how much shares would be, awarded to the whoever invests in you. So it's mathematical in some sense, but then there's also an aspect of negotiation too, that you can negotiate to, you want to up your valuation, or maybe there's terms on it being contingent. I've also seen that happen sometimes. If we achieve this, maybe our valuation will be 15 million instead of 10 million. So there's kind of ways to do that, but you don't really talk about, I don't know, at least in my experience, you don't really necessarily talk about the shares that specific. It's more about, this is my evaluation, this is what I want to raise, this is going to be my post-raise valuation, and it's more so looking at those numbers. And I think everyone just
That's right.
kind of deduces the math themselves.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. Charlie and Kaylin, anything you want to add to that?
I think it's just important to understand how much of the company you're willing to give up and what that value is. So like for me and my co-founders, we're really shy of giving up the company because we have opportunities to make revenue earlier than people like Kaylin, who have to go through regulatory processes and there's nothing they can do about it. So in our mind, the less dilution we can take and the more control we can retain of the company, the better, to an extent. Like, you obviously want to be able to go as quickly as possible. So I've always been told you want to sell somewhere between like 15 and 30% of your company per round, and you're going to be selling more of it the earlier you are, because you have less to prove. So we've been aiming for like mid to low 20s, but that is a personal preference, and everyone just needs to think a lot about that.
Kaylin, anything else you want to add to that, or are you good?
I'd say the only thing I would add is I think most of the negotiation, like everyone said, is not really about how much you're giving up. It's more about the valuation, and that's where the math comes in. Like that's really where you negotiate back and forth, is the valuation, and then it's just straight division at that point of how much you're selling. And I think the only thing I'll add is that, especially in very, very early stage, like pre-seed, sometimes even seed, there's like convertible security. So either like safes or convertible notes that you can do that kind of kicks off the actual like legal selling of shares of the company down the road until you have more and professional investors come in, which that's a longer topic of what those actually are. But if you're a really, really early stage company, there's more simple instruments to do actual kind of raising money and investment than getting corporate documents in place and very formally selling shares of your company.
All right, I'm going to switch to a totally different topic, and it's a summation of actually 3 different questions that have come in. Is, why did you decide to do this on top of everything else that you do? And considering that you were all pursuing academic pursuits at the time, and what drove you to do that, and what drove you to do it, and not instead of perhaps bringing in someone who is a domain expert and has done this a number of times to your area. So, and then kind of a third part of that question is, how did you balance it all? So it's a complex question, but I think it's kind of all encompassing of like, why are you on this journey? I mean, you talked a little bit about that at the beginning, but get more into the drive and why you decided you were the person who needed to do it itself. So Kaylin, I will start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I kind of touched on this in the beginning, but I think that what I was really looking for out of my career is something where I felt like I was actually making an impact. And I also really wanted to have creative freedom. I knew when I was doing my PhD, I didn't want to just go be an industry scientist. And I wanted to have kind of, I wanted to be able to do and ask the questions that I wanted. And I think that also, when I started dipping my toes into the entrepreneurial world, I think I quickly fell in love with it as well. And I think that also, um, I also really always wanted a very dynamic career. Like I think I get bored really easily. And I think that this, where I'm doing something different every day and that there's always different goals to work towards, is I just love it. And I think that if I was doing a job where I was doing the same thing every day, I would go absolutely insane. And so I think it just made sense. And I think I just fell into the right place at the right time. And honestly, it was a very easy yes, and I never really looked back. In terms of how I balance it all, I did it. I think that I, for the last years, my PhD, so I finished my PhD in 4 years, so I graduated early. So I was basically working um 80-hour weeks for 2 years straight. And I think I felt like I was working two full-time jobs and also still somehow maintained a social life. And I think the I I honestly I had a lot of support from my fiance who kind of helped me with just things like I've leaned on her tremendously. And I think that I I think I look back sometimes, I'm just like, I don't know how I did it. So I don't really have advice to give there, to be honest. I think that the way I got through it all was just the drive and the passion of just loving what I did so much. And also I think that my PhD directly overlapped with the company. So the work I was doing to finish my PhD was getting the foundational research for the company. And then it was just like making time to do the business stuff on top of it. Um, and I think why not bring in someone else to run the company? I think that um, really, I think that I just knew that I was the right person to do it. And I think when you're running a very early stage deep tech company, I think that the founder or the inventor and the expert, it makes sense to be the person who's driving the company because I'd say like over 80% of the company's activity is R&D at that point. And really, if you're the inventor and you're the person who came up with the idea and came up with the technology, you just understand it so intimately and you can see the vision more than anyone else. And I think it's really just a matter of learning the business chops and how to run the company. And I feel like if you can get a PhD, you can learn how to do business. It's really just researching. So just learning how to do it. And so it's not that much extra. It's just taking the time to learn the lingo and learn how to do it.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And it really shows, Kaylin, obviously your passion for this.
I appreciate it.
Charlie, I'll go to you.
Me and Kaylin are the same person. It all just comes down to like freedom. It's super fun. You get to do new things every day. And like in your PhD, you were taught how to think. So you just have to think in a different way. And just being able to like push things so fast. Like I was so sick of things moving so slow in academia. And I've now learned working with large companies that they move even slower there. So being able to like really push things and make a difference and have your own schedule and have fun and like the highs are highs and the lows are really low, but it all evens out in the end. My life is also on fire. I do not do it all. I really, really lean on my co-founders and now our other employees to like spread out as much as we can and divide and conquer, but it is not glamorous. It is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Thank you, Charlie. Layla.
Yeah, similar. I wanted to be a professor, even when I chose to do a PhD. I think for me, one of the big moments was I mentioned we would go and talk to oncologists in the early days, and When I stepped foot in the hospital and spoke to an oncologist about the problem in cancer therapy, it was the first time as a biomedical engineer I had actually talked to a physician about a problem that we were trying to solve for. And for me, that was honestly crazy that I had done undergrad and I was in a PhD program towards, I was in my third year and I'd never really even talked to a physician. And that just doesn't seem right. With a lot of, the work that's being done, eventually it's supposed to help and, in health and life sciences to improve people's lives. And so how can we, work on that when we don't, even have a conversation with the people that we're trying to solve for? So that for me was kind of a turning point. And I think everyone said it, the impact that you can actually get to make, the chance of improving people's lives, is the social aspect of it. And then on a personal level, I also enjoy learning. I like dynamic environments, fast paced, it's quick, it's exciting, and you get to meet really amazing people in the entrepreneurship world. These are just like brilliant minds that every conversation, even if it's 15, 30 minutes, you get to learn a lot. And it also kind of shapes your perspective towards life too and what you want to do. So that's also been a really nice aspect to all of this. And then I agree. I think perhaps for a high tech startup, you want a more technical person in the beginning because it's more product development. Even if you bring a business person, I've seen they're mostly serial entrepreneurs that have kind of ran high tech companies before, and so they come in understanding the full technical aspects of it. At least in the early stages, I would say maybe after maybe after Series A, you bring in more experts for the business side. And then balancing it is hard. I don't have a good answer either. I'm sure all of us have stories of, spending our weekends and after hours working on stuff that just needed to be done because of a deadline or something. But it's going to be cheesy. But I think if you're passionate about something, you kind of balance it out yourself and make a decision on what you want to do.
Well, I think that is the perfect way to end our webinar. You are also inspiring. I'm so thankful that you were able to share your stories here today. Focusing obviously on getting that first capital in, which is so critical, but really about what it takes to build an entrepreneurial business out of academia. So thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. I wish you all the best of success going forward as well. For our audience members, we do have a survey that you will receive afterwards. We'd love to hear your response to this. Thank you so much for attending today. Charlie, Kaylin, and Layla, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate your time, and best of luck to all of you.